In the basement laboratory of the Westmore Institute, the hum of old machines fills the air like restless insects. Dr. Evelyn Harrow, head researcher of the Parapsychic Studies Division, leans over a magnetic tape recorder. Her assistant, Thomas Vale, logging every spike in electromagnetic frequency. The experiment is simple. Record the dead. The room smells of dust and ozone, and the clock above the metal door ticks too loudly. As Evelyn whispers to the empty air, the microphone crackles. Not with static, but with a voice, soft and pleading, whispering her name. The instruments react violently. Lights flicker and something unseen brushes the back of her neck. She freezes, unable to move, as Thomas watches the meter's red line. The unseen has answered. The next morning, Evelyn plays back the tape in silence. The whisper is faint but unmistakable. Her name, drawn out and mournful. She stares at the waveform, unsure whether to feel terror or triumph. Science had rules. This, however, belonged to something older, something waiting in the silence between sounds. Thomas finds her hours later, still replaying the same section. The voice on the tape shifts each time, sometimes pleading, sometimes mocking. When he tells her it might be interference, Evelyn snaps, her voice breaking, insisting the pattern responds to her own breath. The tension between them grows palpable, static humming like trapped electricity. At midnight, Evelyn begins a second recording session, alone. The air is heavy, the building asleep. She speaks into the dark, asking if anyone can hear her. The reply comes immediately. A whisper not through the speaker but from the shadows behind her. When Thomas returns the next morning, the tape is still running, spinning endlessly with no voice recorded. But on the wall above the microphone, etched deep into the concrete, are the words, "I heard you." Days have passed, yet Evelyn cannot escape the voice. It echoes through every playback device, each whisper bending itself into her name. She takes the tapes home, convinced she can analyze the interference in peace. Her small apartment hums with the same quiet electricity that once filled the lab. When she plays the reel again, a second voice appears, not calling her name, but repeating Thomas's, as if the unseen had chosen a new target. Thomas dreams of static. Every night he hears his name rising through an ocean of white noise, a tone that vibrates his bones awake. When he visits Evelyn's apartment the next morning, she doesn't answer the door. From inside, a faint sound of tape reels spinning backward, and a woman's voice murmuring, "I found him." Inside, Evelyn sits motionless, eyes unfocused, surrounded by strips of unspooled magnetic tape draped over furniture like black ribbon. She tells Thomas that the signal isn't confined to sound anymore. She saw a figure forming in the reflection of her tape reels. Thomas pleads with her to destroy the equipment, but she smiles faintly and says, "You can't burn a frequency." That night, the Institute's surveillance cameras capture flickers of light moving through the empty basement lab. The machines power on by themselves, reel-to-reel recorders spinning without input. When the security guard reviews the footage, his reflection in the screen lags half a second behind, then smiles when he doesn't. Evelyn and Thomas return to the Institute the next morning to find the lab colder than before. Every surface carries condensation as if the air itself had been displaced. Evelyn presses play on the main recorder, but there is no whisper. Only a long, slow exhale that fills the room like wind through a grave. When the sound stops, a soft knock echoes from the storage closet behind them. The knocking from the storage closet becomes rhythmic. 3 slow taps. A pause, then 2 faster, as if imitating breath. Thomas hesitates, flashlight trembling in his hand. Evelyn reaches for the handle, insisting the sound may be resonant feedback, a vibration through the metal. But as she pulls the door open, her theory collapses. The room beyond is filled with thick white mist, and within it stands a blurred, human shape that shifts like a disrupted signal. They retreat in terror, but the mist follows, curling through vents and cracks, whispering fragments of voices. Every word sounds like their own, looped backward. Evelyn sets up the recorder again, her voice shaking as she demands, "What are you?" The response arrives, distorted but intelligible. "We are what you made us." Later, Thomas reviews the latest recordings alone in the darkened office. On the waveform, he sees something impossible. Not sound, but movement. Each rise and fall of the frequency forms an outline, a silhouette, a face flickering in the oscillation. He realizes the entity isn't bound by sound. It is the sound. Evelyn wakes from uneasy sleep in the lab cot to the faint sound of breathing near her ear. The recorder is off, the room still. She sits up, flashlight trembling in her hand. The air ripples like heat haze, and for a moment she sees herself standing by the door. Identical, motionless, eyes black as the film grain itself. By dawn, Thomas finds Evelyn gone. The lab reeks of ozone and burnt insulation. On the desk lies a single spool of tape labeled Act 1. As he threads it into the recorder, the voice that speaks is unmistakably Evelyn's. Calm, detached, describing events that have not yet happened. Behind her voice, another whispers softly, "Keep listening." The Institute remains sealed under quarantine. No power, no staff, no sound, but the faint hum of machines that should have died weeks ago. Thomas moves through the corridors with a portable recorder, determined to find Evelyn or what's left of her work. Each room plays echoes of her voice, repeating fragments of sentences she never said aloud. In one playback, her whisper becomes his own voice saying, "You shouldn't have come back." In the recording archive, reels spin without human touch. Each emits faint bursts of static that sync with the flicker of the overhead bulbs. Thomas notices a pattern. The lights pulse in Morse code. He jots down each sequence. Heart pounding, the translation chills him. Evelyn. Following the signals, Thomas enters the old broadcast chamber once used for parapsychic testing. A low-frequency vibration shakes the floor, causing the walls to shimmer faintly like disturbed water. Through the glass of the observation booth, Evelyn appears, or something shaped like her, moving in sync with his breath. He whispers her name, and the figure tilts its head, mimicking him perfectly before vanishing into static. He plays the latest tape through the speakers. The sound is no longer whisper or static. It's heartbeat, deep and slow, synchronized with the flicker of the lights. The building seems to breathe in rhythm, walls tightening, air compressing. For a fleeting moment, Thomas feels his pulse stutter, as if his heart now belongs to the recording. In the static's crescendo, a voice cuts through clearly. Evelyn's calm and mechanical. The experiment continues. Then silence. Thomas turns to the window and sees his own reflection smiling back, though his face has not moved. The power dies. From the darkness, a single reel begins to turn, recording without input. When Thomas wakes, the world sounds wrong. Every hum, every echo slightly detuned, as though reality itself were off frequency. He finds himself still in the lab, but the clocks have stopped, and the tape reels have multiplied, stretching across the floor in loops that pulse faintly like veins. The speakers emit a steady breath, not his own. When he speaks, the room answers his words replayed before he finishes saying them. He follows the sound deeper into the Institute, passing through rooms where gravity feels thinner, the air vibrating with unseen pressure. The lights no longer flicker. They pulse in patterns like speech. One fluorescent hum spells words in Morse across the walls. "Let us speak." In the central hall, every speaker activates at once. Evelyn's voice merges with dozens of others. A chorus of tones forming a single message. We remember the experiment. The air shakes with impossible resonance. Thomas covers his ears, but the sound vibrates inside his skull, pulling at something deeper than hearing. He destroys one recorder, smashing it with a metal stool, The voice only multiplies. The remaining devices speak simultaneously in harmony, Evelyn's voice layered across octaves, forming a melody that sounds heartbreakingly human. In the reflection of a shattered tape reel, he sees Evelyn standing beside him, whispering into his ear, though her lips do not move. Every device powers down except one, the original recorder from the first experiment. The red light glows steadily. Waiting, Thomas sits before it, exhausted. The machine begins to play without tape, emitting a clear human breath. The voice that follows is neither Evelyn's nor his own. It speaks directly to the empty air. "We hear you listening." Thomas rewinds the original tape, desperate to find the beginning again. But the audio runs in reverse, playing moments he hasn't yet lived. His own voice screaming, Evelyn laughing softly, and the sound of shattering glass. Every second feels stretched thin, the pitch bending the air like heat. The lab lights dim with each rotation, until the only illumination comes from the tape's dull red glow. He realizes the reels aren't replaying sound. They're rewinding events. Across the room, objects lift from the floor, glass shards reforming, pages crawling back into typewriters. He watches his own movements reverse in reflection, his mouth opening as if inhaling words he never meant to speak. Through the window, Evelyn reappears, or perhaps an earlier version of her. She moves backward, mouth unforming words, steps retreating into time. Thomas pounds on the glass, shouting for her to stop, but his voice plays in reverse as well. The sound of his plea becomes a low growl that shakes the walls. He seizes the recorder, trying to stop it, but it resists. The reels spin faster, pulling the tape taut like a noose. The air thickens, gravity bends, and sound warps into a high, keening frequency that drills into his skull. As he screams, the walls ripple outward, and for an instant he sees dozens of versions of himself, each trapped in the same moment, screaming in perfect sync. Then everything stops. The tape falls silent. The lab is frozen mid-breath, dust suspended in air, machines motionless. Thomas stands before the recorder, now blank, its reels empty. On the desk lies a new label, handwritten in Evelyn's script. Act 7. The sound returns. The click of the record button pressed by invisible hands. The world around Thomas hangs between motion and stillness. Every object seems suspended, as though the air itself waits for command. The recorder sits silently on the desk. The label, Act 7, glowing faintly in the dim light. When he presses play, the tape begins to unspool. Though no reels turn, Evelyn's voice speaks, clear and calm, narrating his every movement. She describes him standing, breathing, trembling, as if reading from a script written seconds before he acts. He whispers her name, and the voice responds instantly. "I am here." The walls flicker like old film, flashes of earlier moments playing backward and forward at once. Evelyn appears behind him, her form stitched together from overlapping frames, her face shifting between life and decay. She reaches for his shoulder, and though he feels her touch, her hand is transparent, made of sound, not flesh. The entity speaks through her, its voice 1,000 layers deep, resonating like thunder through bone. "We have always been recorded. We only needed you to play us back." The lab trembles. Instruments hum as though waking from long sleep. Thomas realizes the machine was never meant to capture the dead. It was meant to build them. The lights explode, plunging the lab into darkness except for one steady glow, the record light on the original machine. The air ripples as if exhaling. Thomas moves toward it, mesmerized. He realizes the recorder is no longer connected to any power source. The voice says, "All proof must end where it began." His reflection in the machine's chrome surface smiles, then leans forward, whispering something he cannot hear. The tape begins to move again. slowly, endlessly. Evelyn's voice returns one final time, whispering, Act 1. Thomas reaches to stop it, but the sound swallows him whole. The machines fade, the lab dissolves, leaving only the hum of recording. Somewhere beyond the static, new voices begin to speak, curious, frightened, asking questions, unaware that their words are already being taped.